Hello everyone, my name is Anna Horden and I currently provide after-school ESL tutoring at a small private school. Unfortunately, I am not allowed to record in my classroom, which means that I will have to do all of my recording here at home, so please just bear with me. The class that I'll be presenting this lesson for is a 9th and 10th grade ELL classroom. Most of the students that I work with in this class are either at an intermediate or advanced ELL level. A lot of them just take this class to have some sort of extra practice with English, and a lot of them have actually tested out of their ELL classroom in their public schools. This lesson is actually part of a larger literature unit. In this unit, we would be studying Gothic horror literature, specifically in the form of poems and short stories. Specifically, this lesson is all about themes, with my goal being that hopefully it will help students when they encounter the typical thematic essay that they might in either high school or college. I take my content and language standards directly from the English Language Michigan K-12 standards. The content standards are pulled from the reading standards for literature, grades 6 through 12, and the language standards are obviously pulled from the language section. The content standard is as follows. Students will be able to determine the meaning of words and phrases as they are used in the text, including figurative and connotative meanings. Analyze the cumulative impact of specific word choices on meaning and tone. For example, how language evokes a sense of time or place, or how it sets a formal or informal tone. The language objective for this lesson is that students will be able to apply the knowledge of language to understand how language functions in different contexts, to make effective choices for meaning or for style, and to comprehend more fully when reading or listening. I actually had a professor here at Wayne State, Dr. Livernoy, who really hammered into our heads the importance of comprehensible input even while delivering the content and language standards for that day. Therefore, I really wouldn't be reading the standards exactly as how they are listed by the state of Michigan. I would be modifying them to be better understood by the students. I think that really goes along with the 10th component of the SIOP model, which is to use speech that is appropriate for students' proficiency levels, whether that involves either slowing down your speech, which I know I definitely need to do more, I do talk very fast, using gestures, avoiding idioms, stuff like that, avoiding or either modifying idioms, stuff like that. So my introduction would actually sound something like this. Alright, we're going to get started with our activity soon. This might be a good time to take out the stuff that we worked on last week. Before we get started, let's go over our goals for the day. We're going to be focusing on themes, just like we worked on last week. Today, we are going to be looking at the details of this text. We're going to be actually going through a story word by word. When an author wants to get their theme across, what kind of words do they use? A lot of our Gothic horror stories are scary. What kinds of words make a reader scared? We're going to be thinking of words like puzzle pieces. How do they come together to make a picture, or in this case, make a theme? Last week, we also talked about how some stories have more than one theme. While you might see one idea, your friend might see another. While you both may be right, we're going to be practicing justifying our ideas or explaining them so that everyone can understand. So I mentioned that students would need to get out their material from last class. In last week's class, students came up with a list of themes that they think Gothic literature often has. We would review the themes and I would write them all up on the board. Let's just say for this example that the themes students came up with were fear, hopelessness, loneliness, and supernatural elements. I would then divide the students into groups. Ideally, I would have time to assign groups beforehand, taking into account English proficiency levels, but just counting off in this case is good too. I would give each group a theme, but leave one for myself, as I'll explain later on. My instruction would sound something like this. Alright, now that we have all been assigned a theme, let's talk about what we're going to do today. We've talked about Edgar Allan Poe before, yes? He's one of the more famous authors when it comes to Gothic horror literature. Today, we are going to be reading just a brief passage out of one of his most famous works, The Telltale Heart. At this point, I would ask if anybody in the class has read the story before. I'm assuming that in a 9th or 10th grade class, someone has, so I'll ask them to, if they could, briefly summarize it for the class, and obviously I would step in if help was needed there. You are, going back to the instruction, you are all going to be reading the same passage, the same paragraph, but you are looking for words that relate back to your theme. In your group, you're going to be taking turns reading. When you find a word that you think relates back to your theme, highlight it right there on the page. In the margin, the space after the text, make a note justifying or explaining your choice. Why did you highlight that word? That's the important part of today, explaining your choice, justifying it. At this point, I'll ask if there are any questions. Because it's a 9th and 10th grade class, no one will raise their hand. So that's when I normally pick a student and ask them to explain the lesson back to me. I normally do that, 2 or 3 times, not because I'm trying to pick on anyone or make them feel uncomfortable, but because hearing the lesson explained in different words might actually help those with a lower students with a lower English proficiency level really get it. That ties into the 11th component of the SIOP method, which is to provide clear explanations of academic tasks in simple language. Students can really help when it comes to this component. Peers can really help out with that sort of thing. At this point, I'll actually lead the class in an example. Let's say the theme I assign myself is fear. I will actually display the excerpt from the story on the projector and will actually read it line by line. After each sentence, I'll ask if anyone found a word that they think relates back to fear. I'll highlight it on the projector and ask them to, briefly explain their reasoning, demonstrating how to make notes in the margins. I'll also throw in some examples of myself by myself so students have something to model their reasoning over. This is to satisfy the 12th component of the SIOP model, which is to use a variety of techniques to make content concepts clear, specifically by modeling the task that I am expecting students to actually perform that day. After the activity is done, I would ask for questions one more time before dismissing to let them try. As they work, I would obviously be traveling from group to group, asking questions, making sure everybody is on task, that sort of thing. Before dismissal, I would copy their work to make sure that every group member had a reference. They didn't just go home with one student. They would also be informed that the next week they would present their findings to the class, which would be a whole different lesson entirely. So again, thank you for listening. Apologies for not being able to record in the classroom. I hope this all made sense. Let me know if you have any questions. Thank you for watching.